sacrifice. What does that mean, sacrifice? Well, it's a discovery, man. It's the discovery of the future. It's like the future is actually the place where there is threat. And it's always going to be there. So what do? You make sacrifices in the present so that the future is better. Right. Everyone does that. That's what you're doing right now. That's what you're doing here. That's what your parents are doing when they pay money to send you to university. They think, you can bargain with reality. It's amazing. You can bargain with reality. You can forestall gratification now. And it'll pay off at a place and time that doesn't even exist yet. It's like, who would have believed that? It's like, that's a miracle that that occurs. And it's not like people just figured that out overnight. You know, we were chimps, for Christ's sake. Like, how are we going to come up with an idea like that? Well, it's like, well, we thought about it for 7 million years. And, you know, we got to the point where we could kind of act it out. But we didn't know what we were doing. But it emerged as like a dream. So the terror of the future is a dream. And the solution to the terror, the dream of the terror of the future, is another dream. And it comes out in mythology and in fantasy and in drama, where you act out the sacrifice. And then it's a step on the way to full understanding. So we can say sacrifice now instead of doing it, you know, although we still do it. It's just not concretized like it used to be. We do it abstractly. And we all have faith that it will work. You know, and we also set up our society so that it'll work. And the society has to be set up so that your sacrifices will pay off, or you won't work, and then the society will die. And so it has to make promises. People have to make promises to one another. And that's what money is. Money is a promise that your sacrifice will pay off in the future. That's what money is. And so if the society is stable, you can store up your work right now. You can sacrifice your impulses, and you can work, and you can store up credit for the future. And then you can make the future a better place. But society has to be stable enough to allow for that. Hyperinflation will do you in. So the promise that's implicit in the currency is the promise that what you're doing now will pay off in the future. And if people don't have that promise, then, well, we know what they do. Because in gangs, for example, in, say, gangs in North America, the time horizon of the gang members shrinks rapidly because they don't really expect to be alive much past 21. And so they get really impulsive and violent, and like, why the hell not? That's what you do when the future doesn't matter, when it's not real. You default back to living in the moment, and you take what you can get right now. And no wonder, because you don't know if you're going to be around in a year. And you get whatever you can while you can bloody well get it. And that's like anarchy, that state. And so you don't want to live in, some people like to live in that state because they're really wired for that, you know. And so they're much more comfortable in those conditions. When you're 25, you can be an idiot. It's no problem. Even when you're out in a job search, it's like, well, you don't have any experience and you're kind of clueless. It's, yeah, you're young, you know, it's no problem. That's what young people are like, but they're full of potential. Okay, well, now you're the same person at 30. It's like people aren't so thrilled about you at that point. It's like, what the hell have you been doing for the last 10 years? Well, I'm just as clueless as I was when I was 22. It's, yeah, but you're not 22. You're an old infant, right? And that's an ugly thing, an old infant. So, part of the reason you choose your damn sacrifice, because the sacrifice is inevitable, but at least you get to choose it. Find what's valuable and let it go. So we could say, well, maybe it's a relationship that you have. Maybe it's a relationship with your parents. But one of the things that you might ask yourself once you know that is that if you're suffering dreadfully, then one possibility is that you're so fixed on the point, the fact that you're so fixed on the point that you're fixed on might be integrally related to why things are going so catastrophically wrong, right? And the relationship is pathological, but you're locked into it, you value it, and no wonder, because it's a relationship with your parents. And you're suffering terribly because of it. Well, what do? Maybe you let it go. It's a sacrifice. And the idea is that, well, that'll clear the future for you. But it's possible that it's what you're clinging to that's hurting you. And it's even possible that's the thing that you're clinging to the hardest that's hurting you the most. That could easily be someone you love. Like lots of times, I see people in therapy and they're miserable for one reason or another. And sometimes it's because they have a very close relationship with a family member, and that just isn't working. You know, the family member, for the sake of simplicity, we'll say, is not really oriented towards helping them have a good life. The family member is instead oriented towards making them as bloody miserable as you can possibly make anyone. And what would you say? Exploiting the bond between family members in order to enable that. And then sometimes the sacrifice that's necessary is either merely distancing yourself from that person, sometimes substantively, and sometimes seriously distancing yourself from them, like we don't talk anymore ever. And so that's pretty damn rough, and it hurts and all of that, but it's a good example of the fact that sometimes in order to extract yourself from the miserable bit of chaos that you happen to be enmeshed in, you have to let go of what you love best. Well, very frequently when people are suffering terribly, not always, because sometimes you just suffer stupidly, blindly, and without recourse, you know. You get cancer and then you die. So we have no idea how to deal with that. But sometimes the reason that you're suffering is because you just won't let go of the thing that's biting you. And you think, well, I can't let go of, and I've had clients like this. I can't stop communicating with my mother, who phones me 3 times a day, every day of my life, and never says anything that isn't unbelievably critical and demeaning. I can't let that go. It's like, well, that's not such a good idea. The funny thing too, often when people let something like that go, it goes away, sorts itself out, and then comes back. So they don't even end up losing it. But unless they're willing to let it go, to sacrifice it, they make no headway whatsoever. And so one of the rules is, if people are impeding your development, you sacrifice your relationship with them, right? It's a very, very rough rule. Like so many gods, requires sacrifice. We've already examined why, but sometimes he goes even further and requires the sacrifice of what is loved best. This is why. And this is another one of mankind's fundamental discoveries. Sometimes things do not go well. That's self-evident. But here's the rub. Sometimes when things are not going well, it's precisely that which is most valued that is the cause. Why? It's because the world is revealed through the template of your values. If the world you are seeing is not the world you want, therefore, it's time to examine your values. It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions.